All right. I'm sitting here with Tom Jordan from 20 Watt Tombstone. And first thing I want to ask, man, is where are you from?
Wausau, Wisconsin.
Whole life?
I was born in a little tiny town called Rhinelander.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Home of the infamous Hodag. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Isn't that like a monster or something like that? Yeah.
We have our own, mythical beast,
Yeah.
I guess you'd call it. American folklore monster.
What is this one? What's its flavor? What does it go after?
It's a weird one. I question who came up with this idea because it's an odd-looking creature. It's got kind of a face like a bulldog, but it's a fur-covered lizard, dragon-type thing with big tusks and spikes coming out of its back. You have to Google it. It's weird.
Yeah.
But supposedly there was a place where they were basically like kind of abusing animals, and they were burning the bodies, and supposedly the Hodag was born out of the ashes of abused animals.
Retribution.
And but it's funny because there's actually a very elaborate story about the hoax that was behind it. So they kind of exposed themselves. But what happened was there was this guy that was claiming it was real.
Yeah.
And this was, I can't remember when exactly it was. I want to say it was like 1800s, early 1900s, something like that. But the guy was like, this is real. We have a Hodag here, blah, 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 blah. And so some guy who investigated these kind of things went and debunked it and found that it was basically a stuffed thing that this guy was using to try and scare people with. But the funny thing is, if you Google this, you'll see all these really old, crude drawings, that people did of it. But there's an actual black and white photo of hunters standing around a Hodag, and there's what appears to be a dead guy with the Hodag on top of him. Now, the Hodag looks really fake, but the work that went into the photo is kind of what impressed me.
Yeah.
But there's a couple like that where they have like these old black and white photos of the Hodag, and it's, hunters standing there proudly like they just shot the thing or whatever, and
wow,
it's wild. But
so Rhinelander, where are you driving to see shows? Once you get the license, where are you going?
When I was a kid, that wasn't a thing.
Wasn't a thing.
Yeah, and I also lived like 15 miles out of town, and I was not allowed to have a car till I graduated. So
okay,
I pretty much didn't go anywhere to do anything.
Were you able to? I mean, was it just you weren't able to get to it, or was there a religion thing, or like?
Funny you should ask. I grew up out in the country, and my parents at the time were very, very conservative.
Okay.
And so I had pretty strict rules growing up. Wasn't allowed to listen to rock music. Wasn't allowed to play guitar.
Wow.
Then finally, when I convinced my parents to let me play guitar, I was allowed to learn classical guitar. And then eventually when I was a teenager, I just stopped listening and did what I wanted and made my parents miserable. But
how long did you learn classical? How long did you have to take those lessons? Or did you?
Well, I was homeschooled for a while, and pretty much the whole time I was homeschooled, I took nylon string classical guitar lessons. So I would say probably 3 years I did classical guitar. And
that's fucking a long time.
Yeah, and I don't remember a damn thing of it.
Well, I can hear you play. I mean, something has to be in the.
I will say this: I still have the finger technique somewhat because I use my fingers a lot, on my picking hand. But yeah, so there wasn't really anywhere to see shows. When I was 17, I snuck out one night, and a buddy of mine picked me up down the road from my parents' house and took me to a bar in town where I played 3 songs with a cover band. And that was technically the first gig I ever played.
First time on stage. Wow.
And then we had to haul ass back to my house, get me snuck back in the house, into my room in bed, get up for school the next day at like 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And my dad was like a private eye. Like he was like, he knew everything. Like I couldn't sneak anything past him. So the next day I get up for school and he was like, there's tire tracks in the driveway and they aren't mine.
Oh.
Like who notices that?
Dude, come on.
So I was like, I don't know anything about that. Somebody must have done a
Turn
U-turn
around,
in the
yeah.
driveway. But yeah, so technically I never really went to shows as a kid. But I did play a show when I was like 17 at a bar, and my parents
so
never knew.
18, graduation, you break on out.
Yeah. So when I graduated, I took a year to kind of work and make some money, and then my parents wanted me to go to a Christian college and preaching school. So that's kind of where I went. And then I just kind of didn't feel like preaching school was for me. I didn't really click with a lot of the ideas, and a lot of the teachings kind of went against my better judgment. And it's not that I have any problem with religion or the people who practice any sort of religion. It's just I didn't feel like I was capable of being the kind of person that I needed to be a preacher.
Sure.
So
you knew it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
It's fair.
Yeah. So my mom is still a little let down. I never became a preacher, but I am an ordained minister now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So where do you land? When do you run into the rock and roll? When does that happen?
So high school is kind of where it started to click, but I wasn't allowed to listen to it. So what I would do is a lot of my friends would loan me tapes.
Sure.
And, back in the day, you had to boombox with
dubbing
with the two tape decks. So I would pull a fast one on my mom, and I would copy like the Iron Maiden, the Metallica, Black Flag, like all that stuff. I would copy it and I would put it on tapes, and I would label it with other stuff that wasn't what was on the tape.
Striper.
Yeah. So it would say like a cappella.
Yeah.
It would say, Christian rock bands and stuff. And then I would give the tapes back to my friends. And I had a huge library of stuff, but it was all on tapes.
Recorded over. That's so great.
And then eventually when I went to public school, when I started going to high school, all my friends and stuff were listening to all these bands that I had never heard of. So like I had never encountered Slayer, and I had never encountered a lot of these other bands.
Oh.
So same thing, I would borrow these tapes from my friends, copy them. And so all of that music was really new to me very late.
How is that? So you grow up kind of, conservative, religious. When you hear something like Slayer at that age, like what you like, what the fuck is this?
I thought it was evil. And I loved it. No, it's like, I try to explain this to my son, like music in the 80s and early 90s was so cool because there was still mystery to music.
Yeah.
And like, because my son and I were having a talk about Kiss, and he's like, I don't get where Kiss is evil, man. Because I was talking to him about like, some of the stuff that, the PMRC and stuff were saying back in the day about Kiss. And, and I explained it to him like this. I said, look, Gene Simmons as the guy from Family Jewels. That's where you know him from. The guy with the hairpiece, always
goofy
bitching
dad
on TV. I knew him as the Demon.
God of Thunder.
Yeah. Like, I didn't see pictures of what he looked like without makeup till way later. And it was a big deal. Like Kiss took their makeup off and it was like, oh my God, what the fuck just happened? But like for me at the time, it was so rebellious and so against everything that I had been taught, that to see this guy painted up and all this, gear, and he's spitting blood all over the place. None of that other shit had come to light yet. We didn't know that he was a fucking asshole. Like you saw, we had magazines. You look at the magazine and it's like, you see Gene Simmons in a pile of women who are in their underwear, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
this guy
still done up in the makeup and
and like you know, like you'd get Metal Edge magazine and like some of the magazines of the era, and they'd have just little pieces into little views into their lives, like just enough that you learn just a little bit. Yeah. You know, and like Ozzy, I remember getting on the school bus as a kid and hearing other kids tell me that this guy, Ozzy Osbourne, bit the head off of a bat. That's all I heard. You had gossip, you had magazines, and you had MTV.
And you didn't have YouTube.
Exactly. And you couldn't Google these people. You couldn't find out what their political affiliations were. You couldn't find out how many times they've been divorced, how old they were.
Yep.
There was mystery to rock and roll. And it made all of that stuff cooler to me as a kid, because when I discovered that stuff, not only was it brand new to me, but there was still this mystery to bands like Slayer and Kiss and all this other stuff that you only got what you were allowed to see at the time. Yeah. And it made you focus on the music and not as much on the people.
So how soon after that does... I'm assuming you had probably a few other bands, but like when does Mean Tooth Grin...
Oh boy.
When does that form?
Way later.
Way later.
Yeah, so what ended up happening with me was like in high school, I was in a few like, you know, typical high school bands where you're playing covers. And then nothing really substantial happened for me for a few years, and it was just jamming guitar at home. And then I had a kid, and when I had my son, I just stopped playing guitar, like, for probably 2 or 3 years.
That happens.
And, you know, I was in an abusive, bad relationship, and, you know, was forced to be a dad full time and focus on my son. So I just chose to focus on him, and everything else kind of took a back seat.
Sure.
But then I moved to Wausau to be with my son's mom and live with them full time. And while I was in Wausau, a guy I worked with at the newspaper was like, hey, this really great blues guy is coming down to Scott Street Steak and Pub, which was like the legendary blues club back in the day before it was torn down. And he's like, I think you should come and sit in with him. And I'm like, dude, I haven't played guitar in years. Like, I can't sit in with him, but I'll come down and check it out.
Wow.
So I came down, and it was Howard Guitar Lidkey from La Crosse.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't know it at the time, but he had Clyde Stubblefield from James Brown's band as his drummer for years. Like, he played with a bunch of legendary people. He played with Johnny Winter a couple of times.
Like
he's the real deal. So he was doing just a solo thing at Scott Street Steak and Pub, and I got to know him, and then sat in with him a couple of times, and then ended up taking guitar lessons from him. And that's really where I learned slide guitar, and that's kind of when I got reintroduced to playing music, but also introduced back into blues. Because when I was a kid, like I said, I wasn't really allowed to listen to a lot of metal and rock, but one of the elders from our church would loan me a stack of old vinyl. And we had a shitty old record player. It wasn't great. It was one of those, you know, it's like the TV console.
Yeah.
It's a great,
love
big,
those
huge
fucking things, man.
One side had a record player.
Hell
so
yeah.
I would go home and I would listen to these records, and he'd give me like Cheap Thrills, Janis Joplin's, you know, other thing.
Big
He'd give
Brother,
me John Lee Hooker, Taj Mahal, like all these cool records, Johnny Winter, Foghat.
Good
like,
stuff. Yeah.
Good stuff. This guy's record collection is just obscene. But yeah, and then after church, he would have me go to his house, and we'd sit and listen to records. And so he became kind of like a father figure to me in a lot of ways, and introduced me to blues. So when I wasn't able to listen to, you know, AC/DC and all this other stuff, I was allowed to listen to blues because my parents thought it was good music that had good moral values.
Well, you know, it's definitely good music.
It's good music. It's fantastic music, but they were mistaken that it had
It's the founding of rock and roll, man. That's like that's perfect.
It's the base of all that stuff. And and the thing is, a lot of that stuff is where like that whole devil imagery from metal comes from. And what it comes from is, these guys were singing honest songs about their relationship with their faith, their relationships with, their lovers, their ladies,
their
whatever.
problems, yeah.
And, the struggles that came through those things. So that stuff is kind of where I started. And then years later when I met Howard, I was able to kind of rediscover all that stuff again through him, and then learn more about the history of it through him too. And so basically, that's when I learned how to play slide guitar, and that kind of reignited the flame. And then I kind of started to go, I need a band. And it took a couple of years, but I ended up joining this existing band that basically was a blues band, and it wasn't fantastic, but I got to play blues. And that band ended up breaking up, and some of the songs that I played with this blues band ended up being used when I started Mean Tooth Grin, which was my heavy ZZ Top rock kind of band.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that was the vibe that I was getting listening to it. It was definitely like kind of a boogie, kind of situation. And I just... So what year is this? Like, give me some context.
So, I think it was 2007. 2007, I went... I got picked up by a label.
Okay.
They were like, we love the stuff that... Because they found me on MySpace.
Ah.
And they found, like, some of the riffs I was posting, and they're like, this is great stuff. Like, we want you to record an album, can you do this? Can you do that? And they asked me a bunch of questions, and I sent them a couple demos of me messing around with my old band. And they were like, we want you to do a record. So I had just formed Mean Tooth Grin, sold the guys on it. They were kind of, skeptical because they were like, who the hell wants us?
We just started. What?
So the label picked us up and took me to Nashville for like 2 weeks, paid for everything for me, took me around, had me sit in on a studio session they were doing with another artist to show me kind of what they do and, all that. And then afterwards, they took me to Clarksdale, Mississippi, where I had never been before. And that kind of changed my life forever because it's, to this day, one of the most musical spots I've ever visited. You can just feel it, like around you.
It's like it was the time that I spent there. I could only liken it to being in Austin, where I got out of the van and I could hear music coming from like every direction, different kinds of music, and this was primarily blues. But I got out of the car in Clarksdale and I was like, it's just coming from everywhere.
If you feel it, you can smell it in the air, you can feel it in the earth. It's just it's hard to explain, but you can feel the history around you. You can just kind of get lost in it.
Absolutely.
And like just it's a very poor city. It's a very kind of rundown city in some spots, but there's a realness that's there.
And the community, I mean, seems pretty good. Like there are people who really give a shit about keeping things going, and that is nice to know. And
I got, basically what I did there is, the label paid for my room, and I had no car, I had nowhere to go, and I had my guitar with. So I just walked around Clarksdale and found places to play, which is kind of probably not the most safe thing to be doing, but I walked around with a guitar, and I ended up at Ground Zero, and I stayed there all night and jammed with a bunch of guys there. I went to Reds for a while, and I played there. And
Reds is great. I mean, both Ground Zero was great too.
Yeah. And one of the guys invited me to go to the Blues Museum and check out the blues school they have there the next day. So I went there the next day and watched them teach a bunch of kids about blues. And when I played at Ground Zero, the backing band that they had for the whole entire night for everybody was a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old playing drums and bass.
Yeah, and kicking ass, I bet.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Super talented. And the thing is, they were churning out like massive talent out of the blues school, because they'd take these kids that had nothing better to do but, get in trouble, and they'd take them at the school and teach them how to play bass and drums and guitar, and give these kids something cool that they could, do instead of getting in trouble, and then give them gigs playing with these old blues guys. So you'd see like these, 90-year-old guys. Like there was this dude named Tater that played with everybody. And when I was playing at Ground Zero, he came in towards the end, and they got up and they were like, hey, so here's the thing. Tater always plays the last song. Like, it doesn't matter who's up here, if it's Alvin Youngblood Hart or whoever.
Sure.
Tater plays the last song.
All right.
I'm like, that's cool. I don't know who Tater is. I'm just here hanging out. So Tater gets up and screams at me during the guitar solo, play that shit, White Boy. That was one of the most intimidating moments of my life. This, 7 foot tall, massive black dude is just like yelling at me to play. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to try.
Better play.
Yeah. So, and then afterwards, he told me I was really awesome and that he had fun. And, I had all these other musicians telling me that I was doing, a really good job.
You're doing it right, yeah.
So it kind of helped build my confidence too. So when I went home from that whole experience, I felt like, if I can play with those guys and those guys say I did all right, I should record a record, and I should involve some of these things that I learned while being down there and combine that with the atmosphere of where I was to make a cool record. And so then in 2009, I recorded the Mean Tooth Grin record, and it's not my best work. I don't think it's, something that I'll probably ever play again, but I feel like it was instrumental in my growth as a musician.
Well, you got to make the first record. You got to you have the experience. I mean,
yeah, you have to, you just got to keep doing it. And the problem I had at that point was I hadn't done it enough up to that point, so I was still learning.
So did you just make the one record with Mean Tooth, or?
We had the one studio record, and then we did a live record after that.
Okay.
And then we were supposed to do a third one, and then the band kind of went separate ways, and it just kind of ended abruptly, and then the label had a problem with us and that whole thing. So that's how 20 Watt began.
And what year is that? Like
20 Watt was 2011.
2011, 20 Watt. All
and
right.
It started as basically a joke. It was a joke band to do something on the side and do something goofy.
Yeah.
And I think it was 2014. We got a call from an agency that wanted to book us a tour, and we were not prepared at all because we didn't think it was going to be anything.
But you'd been playing some shows. Had you met the Left Lane guys by then? Or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually met the Left Lane guys like back in 2008.
Oh, okay.
So when I first met them, I was in Mean Tooth Grin.
Sure.
But, then they met me towards the end of the Mean Tooth Grin stuff and kind of the start of 20 Watt. So they got to see kind of the weird evolution that happened.
Yeah, the build. Mm-hmm. Right on. And then when's the first 20 Watt record come out?
2011, I believe.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, you guys were on it. Like,
Yeah.
you probably had the songs kicking around, or like had been...
Well, like I said, we didn't think it was going to be anything serious. So the songs that we came up with were not all that complex back then. It was, that first record is real bluesy and kind of rootsy. And, so we wrote, I think there's, 5 songs that we wrote, 6. My own fucking record, and I don't know how many songs on it.
It's 2011, man. It's a while.
Yeah, at 48, I'm lucky if I can remember my own name. But anyway, so we had, I want to say 6 songs that were original, and we did a cover. Recorded the whole thing, got done with it. We were broke as fuck, and we were like, we don't have money to put this record out. So a buddy of mine was like, hey, you should do one of those Kickstarter things. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. That's begging. I will not beg. And time went on. Record wasn't wasn't getting done. And a buddy of mine who had just done a Kickstarter goes, "Hey man, like, it's only begging if you're actually begging. If you make it like a pre-order and you actually give people stuff that they would want, then it's a completely different thing." So he kind of broke down what they did, and he's like, you do tiers, you do like, hey, $10 gets you the CD and a poster, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And he goes, make it special. He goes, don't make it dumb stuff. Make it stuff that you would want if your favorite band was doing this. So my first reaction was, nobody cares at this point. We don't have enough fans to do something like this. But against my better judgment at the time, I went ahead and did it. And I was pleasantly surprised. We not only hit our goal for the record, but we originally were just going to do CDs. And then we decided if we hit our goal and then went over, we would do vinyl. And if we hit that and went over, which we didn't think would happen, we'd do some extra stuff. Well, we made enough for CDs, we made enough for vinyl, and then we made enough to do a limited run of 100 different colored vinyl, which we did pure white. And then, you know, we did stickers and some other stuff and just gave it all away.
So is this like groundwork? Do you feel like you laid with Mean Tooth Grin though, like getting just you as a songwriter, like to where people were excited enough? They're like, fuck yeah, we want that record.
I don't think so.
Okay.
As much as I would love to say that the work that I did with the other band had anything to do with this band, I feel like they didn't really overlap. And I you know, with my solo stuff too, I don't see a ton of overlap. You know, the people who like my solo stuff most of the time are not the people who come to see 20 Watt shows.
Right.
It's weird,
Yeah.
you know? But
you've been playing, but I guess 20 Watt had been playing shows and like kind of garnering a following. So I mean, I guess
we had some fans, but really what made it was friends, and you know what I call family, not necessarily my blood family.
No,
but
I get what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
need them too.
My buddy would call it the tribe.
Yeah.
The close people, the people who are, you know, there that you can rely on.
So 2014, you get this call for a tour. Is it the Euro tour, or because you did Europe, didn't you?
That was much later.
Much later.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first tour, this agent that was working with Dave Arcari at the time, I think you booked him a couple of times. Scottish guy, plays resonator guitar.
No, I never actually got him here, but I know who you're talking about.
Super cool guy.
Yeah.
And she had brought him over to the States, and I helped get him some shows. And as a favor to us for helping out, his agent was like, I'll book some dates for you. So, Janet at Bad Blood decided that she wanted to book a tour for us. And so she booked a month. First tour out of the gate was a month long. And it was primarily Southeast Coast. And the issue we were having was, at the time, our name was not 20 Watt. Our name was the Goddams.
Oh,
and
it's different.
We got some interesting reactions.
The Bible Belt didn't like that?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: is like most people at shows didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
It was people who were worried about the potential of people at shows being offended. Didn't like it. So it was like the idea of it was offensive, but the actual thing didn't seem to be bothering anybody. So she was like, this tour is getting hard to book. I don't know if I can book it. I think, you know, we're either going to have to settle for a bunch of open dates, or you might have to change your name. So we've worked with an entertainment lawyer since I was in Mean Tooth Grin. So I called him up and asked his opinion. He's like, trademark the name, trademark the Goddams. And then just roll with it. If that's what you want to do, trademark it, roll with it. Well, the trademark office told us we couldn't trademark it because it's a swear word. So that was the first red flag. Then the agent telling us that it was hard to book was the second red flag. And then we saw another band pop up with the same name, and we're like, you know what, this is too much trouble. So we changed our name to 20 Watt, went on that first tour, and everything turned out great, and just moved on from there.
Quick rewind. Why would you look into an entertainment lawyer when you were still back with Mean Tooth Grin? What's that?
Basically what that was, I read his book. He put out a book, and I thought it was fantastic. So I contacted him. I said, "Would you ever work with a band?" And he said, "Yeah." So originally, what I had enlisted his help for was I had a song back then called "Before the Devil Knows You're Dead," which I now re-released under my solo stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
but I had put that song out, and I thought it would make a good soundtrack song, and I didn't know how to pitch it to movies or anything like that. Well, he did that kind of thing. So I had him basically pitch it out there and see what he could get. And we didn't get a whole lot. Like, he found like a commercial for a car dealership that was interested in using like a snippet of it. Yeah. I think they used it for a little bit.
My girlfriend was just watching one of them murder shows today, and it had a snippet of this band, The Paper Chase. And I was like, this guy stayed in my house. What the fuck? You know, it's like, I mean, it's not like a super popular show or anything. Like, it's just like I heard the sample and I was like, what the fuck? But I mean, I assume that's what you're talking. I mean, it's like, I don't know how much money there is in that, but it seems like a lot of smaller bands do the licensing thing.
You got to monetize everything in this business because the gigs and the merch are only a small part of it. So every little bit of passive income that you can make off of your music, you should be doing. And, you know, soundtracks are huge. You know, buddy of mine had his career pretty much blow up because of one song. You know, and he ended up in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Left Lane has multiple songs.
Yeah, right.
In like, they had a song in Sons of Anarchy. They had a song in Breaking Bad. They had a song in that Preacher show and multiple other ones. Like, you know, that all adds up.
It does add up. I mean, I never thought about it. You know, like just that 10 seconds of commercial music or like, you know, bump music between the commercials or whatever, you know, it's crazy. I mean, is it decent money?
That one wasn't.
Yeah.
That one was not. That was like, basically what it was is the person got in the car and turned the radio on, and they played a snippet of our song for a minute, and then the commercial started. So then other music played.
Sure.
But 20 Watt had a song get put in a movie about 6-7 years ago, and it wasn't a huge movie. I can't even remember the name of it now, but that one we got like $425 for that placement. And when I talked to our lawyer about it, he's like, for you guys at your level, for what this is, he goes, this is good.
That's about what it should be. Huh.
So he seemed to think it was pretty average for what it was. But, you know, and I was all excited about this movie. So when it was on Hulu too. So I was like, that's awesome. Everybody can watch it. So I'm like, hey, everybody, we got a song in this movie. And then I watched the movie. The radio DJ goes in the booth, puts music on the radio station, and then comes out and has a fight with somebody outside of the radio station.
Yeah.
And the song that he's playing while they're having dialogue is our song, but you can barely hear it. Like, because the dialogue is the focus, but you can kind of hear your man's jerk in the background. So, you know, after that I was kind of like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to tell anybody about this anymore because it's not that cool. But
so 2014 first tour. How many? You say that's the tour of the Southeast. Where do you guys start really connecting?
Honestly, to this day, our best markets are, you know, like Chicago, Austin, Atlanta, places like that. But, you know, like, we have really good luck touring in the Southeast. Like, that seems to be where we click the best.
Okay.
But, you know, like, Texas is always good. Like, Texas treats us really well. But the thing that's hard to gauge nowadays is you have where you do well with streaming, and it's not always the same places that you do well with shows. Like, some of our best streaming places are places where we don't sell a ton of tickets. And then other places that don't even show up on Spotify, you know, we're doing really well in. So, like Green Bay, Wisconsin, we can pack them in Green Bay, and Green Bay does not show up on our Spotify as one of our top listened to cities.
Interesting.
But we can draw 100 people with our eyes closed, easy there. But according to Spotify, like Atlanta, Chicago, Austin, those are all really good. Then there's, what are some of the other ones that we do well in? Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is still growing for us. Mm-hmm. But like on Spotify, it's in the top 5 all the time.
What was it like to work with Left Lane and Alive?
Alive didn't actually touch
they were
that
part
record.
Of that? Okay.
No, we did that split record with them, and it was super fun.
Just self-released between the two of you
yeah.
guys? Oh, wow.
We tried to get Alive to be involved, and I think they didn't know enough about us at that point, and I think they were kind of apprehensive because of us. So, yeah, we basically put it out ourselves and had Left Lane on one side, us on the other.
Yeah.
And that actually was a huge help, because I think a lot of the Left Lane fans discovered us that way.
Well, I think it's a pretty natural,
yeah,
duo, honestly.
Where those guys work, we almost always work.
Exactly.
Venue-wise or anything.
How many tours have you done with with them?
Actual tours, we've only done one.
Okay.
But we've played, at this point, probably hundreds of shows
together, right?
Them.
Tell us about Brother Deej.
Deej.
Deej
was a good friend of mine. I met him about 10 years ago through the booking agency that I was just talking about that took us out on the first one. Mm-hmm. He's who I was talking about that had a song that blew up because it got put in a Quentin Tarantino movie. But I met him about 10 years ago. I should say I started talking to him about 10 years ago and discovered him through our booking agent because she was booking him. And he and I just kind of clicked because we're both older guys, fathers, been at this for a long time, beating it out on the road, not really seeing, the return that we wanted to at the time. So we were both, kind of feeling like, why are we doing this? We're old. We should be doing other things. So we kind of bonded over that kind of stuff and just talking about the road. And
was he an artist that you'd been following, or?
I didn't know anything about him until our booking agent mentioned that she booked him.
Okay.
And so I checked him out, and I'm like, whoa, this guy is pretty amazing. And
always bluesy, kind of acoustic.
His stuff is weird. I don't know how to describe it. It's definitely got roots in Delta blues and folk music, but it's almost got like a psychedelic edge to it. Mm-hmm. And the songwriting is more on par with guys like Sean James, Amigo the Devil, stuff like that. It's very, very dark, serious music with extremely well-written lyrics. So I just hit him up one day on Twitter and was like, hey, Janet, our booking agent, told us about you, and she's booking you and she's booking us. Maybe we can do a tour together sometime because I feel like our music would fit. And he responded right away, and that was kind of what started it. And then we started kind of communicating over the internet. He'd be like, hey, I see you're at blah, blah, blah tonight. Like, let me know if that place is cool. And then same thing, I'd be like, well, that place you played, did they pay okay? Is that place cool? And eventually we met up in real life and just clicked. And a lot of the things like being fathers and being older road guys who had been through all this life stuff that was very similar. We kind of had similar struggles, and we both suffer from depression, and that was something we bonded over as well. And then fast forward a few years, we had gotten to be really good friends, and I asked him before COVID, I was like, would you ever want to do a record together?
Yeah.
He's like, I would love that. So then I was like, whoa, this guy is he said he's going to do a record with me. And So what had started to happen is he was kind of my go-to when I didn't have a whole lot of faith in what I was writing. I would run stuff by him and see what he thought. And he'd be like, the chorus is too long, or this is whatever. So he became not only like a good friend, but a musical mentor and someone that was basically, helping me kind of edit what I did.
Yeah, put together the Reverend Mean Tooth stuff, right?
Well, the new 20 Watt record,
new 20 Watt
he
too.
produced the record,
Okay.
and he co-wrote 2 songs with me on there. And that's when COVID hit. He and I both were stuck home and couldn't tour, and so we were both kind of just talking every day about like how much it sucked to not tour, and our depression and that sort of thing, and basically what happened was we started writing the new 20 Watt stuff, and he started writing his last record that he wrote before he passed. And so while he was writing that, he was also working with us on our record. And then, we put this record out that he produced and co-wrote stuff on. And then he got signed by Prophecy, put out his record like a week after he died. But, he was a writing machine. And I guess when he, when he passed, he had all this hard drives full of, unreleased stuff, and
the vault,
books full of lyrics and all this stuff. Like, the guy was just a fountain of creativity.
Wow.
But,
sorry, man.
Yeah, it's it sucks, but it's I think it speaks to how we need to address mental health in this country. I think that
guys for
yeah.
I mean everybody, but yeah, guys are the ones that are not supposed to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it hits very close to home a lot more than we think it does.
Yeah,
or than we're willing to admit. And the link between artists, especially, and mental health is becoming more and more obvious. And Deej always said to me all the time, he's like, nobody wants to buy art from a sane person. And the idea was that the crazier the artist, the better the art. And that's true in a lot of cases, because that's how we get out what we need to do. But you see all the time, these, not just musicians, but artists, poets, actors, painters, writers, all of it. People that do creative things generally do that not because they want to, but because they have to. It's that thing inside of them that they're trying to get out. And I think with Deej, that was what allowed
it doesn't look
him.
Easy.
Yeah, and it's not. And in a lot of cases, the very thing that's keeping us alive is killing us at the same time. Like, it's good and bad for us. It's a double-edged sword. So, like for guys like Deej and I, one of the things that we identified with each other on is that we love the road, but we hate the road. We love what it gives us as far as, kind of being an antidepressant. And it gives us a path, it gives us focus. But at the same time, it keeps you away from family. It keeps you away from loved ones. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your mind in a lot of ways too. And the stress of constantly trying to be able to create, to keep up with the lifestyle of doing what you do is hard too, because there's this pressure that you have to be putting out music. You have to be creating all the time. So, and then, now you have the added bonus of social media pressure, because you have to now be, an influencer as well as a musician, and you have to
in a sea of a million
stuff.
Other motherfuckers.
Exactly. So there's a lot of pressure for artists to not only create but then promote the work that they create
constantly.
So,
yeah. Tell me a little bit about the solo project.
That also started as kind of a joke.
Hey.
But I kind of pulled back from some of my conservative childhood stuff, some of the old school culty preacher guys, and created this idea of Reverend Mean Tooth, this guy that's, Old Testament screamer preacher guy, snake handler type dude. And basically all I do with that is like straight up Delta blues and gospel stuff, like super, super pure to the source kind of stuff. Like I use a stomp box for like my foot to tap, and then I use a tambourine with my other foot. So it's very old school. And then I just use a resonator guitar with no effects, no distortion, no nothing, and just yell. Dude.
Seeing you, and I think it was Keith was there too, like up at it was like Mount Tabor, Wisconsin.
Oh yeah,
like, man, you know, taking it that's taking it to the streets. That's out there. Like,
yeah. Well, you know, the thing is, like, with that kind of show, it is very niche, but I can also do stuff with that I can't do with 20 Watt.
Sure.
You know, like I can go play a supper club to pay the bills.
Yep.
You know, I can make the safe money.
And you're able to do that. I mean,
I'm able to do that.
That's awesome.
You know,
I mean,
they aren't the most fun gigs to play for people while they're eating.
No.
But, you know, the thing is, I've chosen to do this for a living, and, you know, you got to do the...
Got to dance with who you came with.
You got to do the work parts and the fun parts. It's just, you know, and at the end of the day, I get to play guitar and get paid for it.
Yeah.
So there's worse ways to make a living.
Right on. Well, Tom, thanks for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.